hostage to injustice. I was born in a world of borders, barricades, and demarcation lines. And since I could not change the world around me, I created a world inside me, and I held on to it. It was a world with no borders, barricades, or demarcation lines. It was a world of hope. To deny hope is to deny life. For what is life without hope but a mockery of living, a theatrical existence, a theoretical state of being, a pale copy of reality? It is hope that has allowed humankind to thrive under the most adverse of conditions. Hope that has given human beings the vitality essential to endure all manner of misfortunes, all horrors and hurts, all tragedies and tribulations, all cataclysm and catastrophes, and all seemingly cynical condition. Hope is the necessary nectar of the demoralized in despair, of the discouraged and downhearted. For when the conditions of our existence are unacceptable, what is left of life but hope? And what is a man but his convictions? And what can a good man do but follow his? It has been said that those who rebel are a threat to peace. Yes, rebels do pose a threat, but not to peace. They pose a threat to the global system of control sustained by the transnational ruling class. Those who resist despotism, occupation, maltreatment, and persecution are not terrorists. They are resistants. The source of all terrorism is the corrupted system that convicts people who follow their convictions and which imprisons them illegally. The terrorists are the government serving their own agenda rather than serving their own citizens. For there is a shadowy force lurking behind the scenes, determined to demand the submission of all who refuse to acquiesce and conform. Let us not forget that Nelson Mandela was once called a terrorist. The only thing worse than being unfairly convicted of a crime is being held longer than one was sentenced. A prisoner held past their sentence is no longer a prisoner, but a hostage. The only thing greater than injustice is injustice within injustice. Injustice is an insurmountable obstacle to humanity. Neutrality in matters of injustice is complicity. Who but humans can champion human rights? If we do not protect each other, then who will? And if a person trespasses against his fellow man, does not justice even apply to just punishment? When we politicize the pursuit of justice, we ironically perpetuate injustice and contribute to corruption. How many voices must scream out before they no longer fall on deaf ears? For our children of conscience are not unruly offspring. They are the progeny of righteous revolution. I have heard their testimonies, felt the anguished breath of the oppressed on my face. They have not been imprisoned by their oppressors, but by their own conscience, and not only their bodies imprisoned, but their very consciousness. The one imprisoned thus become both the jailed and the jail itself. Martin Luther King Jr. said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Those who resist injustice, those who lead rather than follow, have been called dangerous, and I am afraid that this is all too true. They are incredibly dangerous. They are a danger to the powers which seek to suppress the freedoms of every person on the planet and wish to subvert every rebel, every free thinker, and every independent person. They are a danger to this dark force that pits nation against nation and governments against their own people in order to brutalize and prey upon all nations or individuals targeted by their insidious agendas. Those who resist oppression are dangerous because they think for themselves. But the greatest threat they pose is the potential to inspire others to awaken from apathetic complacency and act on their convictions rather than submitting to malevolent so-called authorities. If only we were all so dangerous. I call for us all to become dangerous. This is a call for us all to follow our own convictions and resist all suppressive forces. I call for a global revolution, a collective conviction that begins with each individual's personal convictions. May we all rise now with determination and bravery that each and every one of us poses just such a threat and just such a danger to a global paradigm of inconceivable injustice. After all, they cannot imprison us all.
It was very, very different from growing up elsewhere because of the war, definitely.
Yeah, sure.
But one thing you learn to live your life, like the next day, you're not going to be there, you know.
And it's beautiful life.
It is definitely like the single.
Like the
Beautiful
single.
Life, yeah.
On Pulse 8. Anyway.
Pulse 8, yeah.
Anyway, so listen, I've listened to the single loads of times, Beautiful Life, and it sounds very Western, which is great.
Yeah.
But obviously your roots are from the Middle East, so how did you come through to this Western music?
I'm English educated, and I love the language because I feel I express myself better in English. And when I was young, I was listening to all kind of music, English songs, French songs. I've always loved Western music, and it was very natural for me to just sing in English and express myself in this language.
And what was the genesis of moving away from rock and all the heavy metal stuff with the fireworks? Because the singles are very gentle.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not changing, it's developing, you know. There is always a room for the, yeah. No, but it was natural because of the wave. There was a wave around 84, 85 up to 87, you know, in the Lebanon of rock music, and the music that we were performing was exactly what we were influenced, you know. We were very influenced by the music that the radio stations were playing, and people liked that style. And later on I started writing my own material, and I realized that it was not really that hard or that tough, you know, not very rockish, you know. It was more on the softer side, very emotional.
Yes. So when you do the album, fingers crossed and everything like that, because I know you're planning it now, you're going to be working with the same team?
Yes, we're going to move ahead, you know, with some more. We've got loads of songs, you know, to choose from, so we're going to be doing that in the next weeks.
And a lot of them presumably your own?
Some of them my own, some of them Barry's or whoever is contributing, you know, to the record.
You just recorded the single. How was that? Was it a good experience?
Very comfortable, you know, very relaxing. Good mood.
Who worked with you?
It was Barry Blue who produced the track and who wrote the song Beautiful Life, and he produced it together with the Rapino brothers. And there you are,
So
Beautiful Life.
Show me how to love. Tell me how to feel.
other people say, while time just slips away. 'Cause it's a beautiful life, beautiful life. I just wanna live it. It's a beautiful world, beautiful world. I just wanna give it. It's a beautiful life, beautiful life. You know I gotta live it. Oh, it's a beautiful world, beautiful world. And I just wanna give it. Oh, I wanna live it, give it. Beautiful life. I wanna live it, give it. Beautiful life. 'Cause it's a beautiful life. It's a beautiful life.
Unlike some cultural aspects that are relative, violations of innocent people's physical integrity, such as dropping bombs on them, is universally deviant. It is also universally criminal. When the nations of the world begin to focus their power and resources on protecting and preserving human life rather than taking it, we will see the first true efforts being made to counter terrorism. When governments in the Middle East begin helping their people and their neighbors rather than crushing them, we will enjoy the first fruits of true counter-terrorism. When the governments of the West begin aiding the people of the Middle East and supporting non-terrorist states rather than raining bombs upon the innocents, we will finally partake in the peace that is true counter-terrorism. A human life is never collateral damage. It has been the strategy and convoluted tactics of governments to create a problem and then offer a solution. As we are witnessing all over the world, especially in the Middle East, the disparity and gap between government and its people has become so colossal to the degree of incurable unless drastic measures are taken now. Poverty, lack of education, religious persecution, radicalism, economic turmoil, social suppression, and oppression of refined liberties and freedoms, especially of minorities, sows the seeds of terrorism and thus counter-terrorism. There is a disturbing trend of more and more restrictions of people's freedoms. People are being stripped of their rights, and all in the name of security. But what greater right is there than to life? And so-called counter-terrorism takes more life annually than terrorism itself. A 2009 study conducted by the University of North Carolina concluded that the most commonly utilized counter-terrorism tactics, such as extrajudicial killings, torture, forced disappearances, and political imprisonments are, in fact, themselves acts of terror. To terrorize in the name of combating terrorism is ironically hypocritical. When counter-terrorists use the tactics of terrorists in order to counter terror, they descend to their moral level and just add more terror to the world. And if that were not enough, when counter-terrorists terrorize people, they generate the terrorists. In addition to civilian casualties, governments insidiously conspire to abuse other basic rights in the name of fighting terrorism. They tighten security to an unreasonable degree, impose petty rules and regulations, and censor the masses, hence creating police states devoid of freedom and instilled with fear, the perfect breeding grounds for terrorism. Thus, we are faced with a vicious cycle. Counterterrorism breeds more terrorism, and then more terrorism breeds more counterterrorism, and so on ad infinitum. Political activist Noam Chomsky stated that counterterrorism is terrorism by another name. We must counterterrorism in order to uphold human rights and give weight, resources, and priority to it. Military and clandestine agencies unilaterally function from a consequentialist point of view with a modus operandi that denotes that their goals, professedly productive, be accomplished by any means necessary, even if those means are themselves directly counterproductive. The ends do not justify the means. We cannot justify criminal means to fight crime. We cannot terrorize to fight terrorism. We cannot devalue human life in the name of preserving it. Rather than fighting and countering terrorism, governments the world over should work collectively and implement new domestic and foreign policies that adhere to the dignity and integrity of their citizens, campaigns that require a truly comprehensive strategy that surpasses military action and intelligence. There should be serious consideration given to the legal and ethical ramifications of international counter-terrorism efforts, not to mention accountability. And policies should be redefined in accordance with the protection and preservation of human rights. Many governments, both in the West and the Middle East, have failed drastically to respect the basic standard rights articulated in the United Nations Human Rights Declarations of 1948 and subsequent international and regional covenants. Records of most Arab states towards their own citizens are as bad or worse as the West, thus deepening and widening the gap between them and their people. The obvious truth, the big elephant in the middle of the room, is that militaries under the command of governments who do not value or respect human life are terrorist groups, and that counter-terrorist operations are terrorist attacks. The only difference is that of resources. The only way to fight terrorism without violating human rights is through non-violent means. How dare these counter-terrorists shed our blood in the name of protecting us? Would they consider the deaths of their own children to be justifiable collateral damage? We, the people, should demand an end to all forms of terrorism. I'm Lydia Canaan. I'm a singer-songwriter, a humanitarian, and an activist, and I am here to participate at the UPR conference because I believe in human rights and in upholding human rights. I will be delivering a speech titled Humane Evolution, and I have written a song about human rights called Humanity, Wake Up and Fight. When you're beaten to death and your hope is raped in the absence of defense, more attacks, more raids, when mercy's far away, a plead for help's not near, and justice fades away, you live in in constant fear. When you are left without a choice to have a say or raise a voice, stand for your right and shout, humanity, wake up and fight.